Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the American Juche Study Group. My name is Noah Schenk, and I am the founder of it. And I'm also the editor of this semi-new text. And there will be a sequel coming out soon because there is so much to study when it comes to the Juche ideology, so much that we can learn from, as American organizers. But Juche for American Workers, which compiles the writings of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-Il, and will be the text used for our weekly study sections. The American Juche Study Group is a broad initiative, including people of all races, religious backgrounds, and political affiliations who are interested in learning the ideology of the Korean Revolution. We bring with us a spirit of intellectual charity and goodwill toward all humankind. We refuse to accept the hateful caricature of North Korea presented in American media, and instead want to learn the ideas that have held the DPRK together for so long, enabled it to withstand circumstances that would most certainly cause any other government on the face of the planet to fall. We come with open minds and diversity of thought, sharing one goal: peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula, in the context of a world without war and poverty, in which every nation is enabled to grow and thrive to its fullest potential. Now, we ask that if you are studying with us today, if you could please contribute a $5 contribution, a small contribution to support our work, because unfortunately being an organizer is not free. It costs money to do all of the things that we do at the Center for Political Innovation, all the amazing things that we do to spread anti-imperialism in the United States, to spread the truth about countries like the DPRK. And we've done more than any other organization to support the DPRK. So if you could just donate $5, it would be greatly appreciated. You can follow the link in the chat. I would also like to remind people that, again, it's a public study session. So if you are so inclined, if you want to discuss the ideology of the Korean Revolution with us, you can also follow the link in the description, and you're more than welcome to give your insights or even just to listen in. So we can get started, because tonight's text is quite interesting. It's something that is of interest to us at the Center for Political Innovation. We've published a whole pamphlet about this flower before we were made aware of this essay. Yes, as Caleb's holding it up right now. Yes, why is it impossible to get this flower in the United States? And what flower would that be? That would be Kim Il-sung. And tonight's text is Kim Il-sung is an immortal flower that has bloomed in the hearts of mankind in the era of independence. It's a very, very communist for an essay about a pretty flower. It sort of gets into the history of the flower, where it comes from. So the context of this is Kim Jong-Il is giving a speech to the Department of the Central Committee of Workers, so the Korean Workers' Party. He's basically briefing them on the upcoming Kim Il-sung Flower Festival, which is held every year to celebrate Kim Il-sung, the flower that honors the great leader, the founder of the Korean Revolution, who helped to liberate the Korean people from Japanese occupation, who made People's Korea what it is today. He says, "Greetings. The day of the sun this year, the 40th since the naming of the Kim Il-sung. The traditional Kim Il-sung festival is being organized in an extraordinarily grand way. This is quite laudable. Kim Il-sung was so named at the suggestion of President Sukarno of Indonesia when the great leader, President Kim Il-sung, was visiting that country in April of 1965. As we've spoken about in the past, right? Sukarno was a great leader of the people of Indonesia. He was somewhat aligned with the Communist Party, but really, I wouldn't even call him, a communist. I would say that Sukarno was just somebody who wanted what was best for Indonesia. I would say that's how I would best describe him. Sort of a popular front figure, sort of like a Roosevelt sort of figure who wanted what was best for Indonesia and wanted Indonesia to be independent. And as a result of that, he was like a central figure in what would become the non-aligned movement, a group of countries that, didn't take sides in the Cold War, sided with neither the United States nor with Moscow, which of course, the U.S. imperialists took to mean if you ain't with us, you're against us. And they unfortunately did a brutal and disgusting coup against the people of Indonesia, which eventually just became just a genocide of ethnically Chinese people. Because I guess the stereotype of ethnically the Chinese people in Indonesia it's quite similar to stereotypes about Jewish people in the United States, right? People of Chinese descent in Indonesia, they tend to be middle class, right? For various historical reasons. Doctors, lawyers, professors, etc. They also tend to be more socially liberal as a result of their class position. And, because China was a huge communist country, also they're more sympathetic to the idea of communism in general. And so, that was a very ugly thing that happened at the behest of our government, at the behest of people like Barack Obama, whose stepfather, Lolo Soetoro, was heavily involved in a lot of this killing and murder. And yeah, maybe at some point I can even read an excerpt from letters from my father that really talks about just the sort of brutality of the kind of person who would do that to the Indonesian people. But unanimous. Do you have something to say?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you speak of how ethnically Chinese populations were sympathetic to China. I think in Malaysia, there was a leader who was trying to lead his own communist rebellion against the Malaysian government. Malaya, that is what the British called it. Now it is called Malaysia. His name was Chin Peng, and it was a horrible war. It was horrible insurgency. I mean, the British sent people in to suppress it.
I think that the framing of Sukarno as being a communist is partially CIA-led because they wanted to make the justification to eliminate and execute the left in Indonesia. I don't know the exact numbers, but
I think it's similar to like Noriega, and I'll often hear like liberals online when they talk about Noriega because they don't know who Noriega was, but the CIA has put out this story out there about when they got Noriega and how they like blasted rock music all day outside of where he was hiding to sort of drive him out. And they'll tell that, oh, the dictator's Noriega, and it's like, well, first of all, like how are we describing dictator? And also it's like, so oh, it's just so funny that like they tortured this person and then like brutally murdered him because he didn't want the United States. He wanted the United States to pay a fair price on ships going through the Panama Canal.
They didn't kill him. They just brought him to the U.S. They extradited him to the U.S. Then he was sent to France, and then he died in obscurity.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for correcting.
The 2010s. I think he sued the Call of Duty people because he was in a Call of Duty game.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, Call of Duty tends to be horribly pro-imperial.
I think the most recent Call of Duty, they have you kill cats. Yeah. I mean, and that's because, who's funding Activision, who's funding, Arma, the Arma series, I know, which is very popular. Arma 3, if folks remember the Ghost of Kiev, you guys remember that, and that turned out to be footage from Arma 3. I guess Arma 2, the first two Arma games were, the reason why they're so difficult, I guess, is because they were used by the U.S. military as military training. And then the Arma 3 went commercial, and that, a lot of the video games, are funded by the U.S. government and are used partially as recruiting and partially as a means of training people. And I know at this point, drone operators like literally use Xbox controllers, which is kind of sick.
I will say that in Indonesia, Sukarno is viewed as like the founding father because so much of the infrastructure was built by him. And when I was in Russia, members of the Indonesian parliament were getting up and talking about how much they love him. And even though the coup happened and that there is still like a strong Islamist layer in the country that hates him, largely the population views him as a great leader, which I think is interesting.
Was he a Muslim who disliked certain kinds of Islamism, or was he just a totally secular guy? Or why would Islamists hate him?
He was replaced. The guy who replaced him was ultra Muslim, right? And denounced him as like being an atheistic communist. I don't know if he was an atheist or not, though. I don't know if he was religious or not. But yeah, the guy who replaced him, the military dictator Suharto, was super religious. And Indonesia is a very Muslim country.
Yeah, and I think he did implement some like liberalistic sort of reforms, I guess, as well. I mean, there were like prominent feminists within the Indonesian government at one point that were aligned with the Communist Party, right? That were like doing crazy things, like advocating that women should vote and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean that could be a reason as well. But it's interesting that he is widely admired. And Indonesia at this point, despite having a huge Islamist influence, and in spite of the coup, it's still illegal to be a communist. But China does so much development in Indonesia. So much business in Indonesia is done by Chinese companies, and I think increasingly, Russia as well is quite close with Indonesia. I know that Russia has made a huge effort to expand media presence in Southeast Asia as of recently. That they want to set up a presence in the Philippines, and that they own several stations that broadcast to places like the Philippines and to Indonesia. I mean, it's a developing country that is very much, not aligned and sort of wants the best for themselves, right? And that also has a history of being mistreated by the West as well. And I also wonder, with everything that's going on in Iran and the Middle East, with the Palestinian resistance, how a majority Muslim country that is in Southeast Asia, of course, is separated from the conflict to an extent, how they feel about a relationship with the U.S. I can imagine that, it's not great for relations with Indonesia, the way that the current administration is acting. But yeah, we can move on to the next slide. Okay, so 1 year before President Kim, so this is Kim Jong-Il sort of explaining the story behind Kim Il-sung. Yeah, it's a really beautiful story. So he says, 1 year before President Kim Il-sung visited Indonesia, Sukarno had visited our country, witnessing the real situation of Korea, forging ahead along the line of independence, self-sufficiency, and self-reliant defense advanced by President Kim Il-sung. He had been deeply moved. He said President Kim Il-sung attended a session of the Provisional People's Consultative Assembly of Indonesia, at which Sukarno made a speech proclaiming that a new society should be built under the banner of Juche and a self-supporting economy. So I guess Sukarno was a big fan of Kim Il-sung. Was a big fan of what was going on in Korea. And that's not really shocking to me. I mean, this would have been 1964, right? So this would have been when North Korea was the fastest growing economy on the planet. And if you look at, the state that North Korea was in 1948, you compare that to where it was in the 60s. I mean, it was a semi-modern country at that point, I mean, certainly not at the level of development of, for example, the USSR or the United States, second or first world countries, but certainly doing better than South Korea at that point. That's for sure.
Yeah. Che Guevara visited North Korea during these years and said he wanted to model Cuba on North Korea, from what I understand. In North Korea, I believe they were having GDP growth rates of like 10% a year, like massive numbers, and they had rebuilt the country. They'd fully electrified. It was like they were just kind of speeding ahead during these years.
Yeah, and there are a number of reasons for that. And, in spite of the fact that North Korea, cannot was not very good at, they didn't have the arable land that's primarily in the south, right? But there's so much mineral wealth in the north of Korea. So that's for one. And two, the population was relatively technically skilled compared to other developing countries at the time because of all of the Koreans that had been used as like slave labor for the Japanese. So they were relatively more technically skilled. And then also there was a huge effort put into educating the population. And also like Korean culture puts a huge emphasis on being scholarly and learned, a huge emphasis on, on reading and stuff like that. So there's that as well. And yeah, I mean, also just very competent leadership that made sure that, Korea would advance. I mean, and again, yeah, I believe in, they called it at this point, the North Korean economic miracle, right? And as you said, Che said that he wanted to model Cuba's economy on it. I don't think he did that very successfully, but oh well. Yeah, I mean, even today, I mean, relative to all of the sanctions that are put on it, the level of development that they're able to, being able to make their own smartphones and, produce their own microchips at this point, for what it's worth, their missile technology is quite advanced. Their weapons technology is advanced relatively speaking. I mean, it's kind of difficult to say that to look at North Korea and then you look at the other countries of Southern Asia and of East Asia prior to the non-Asian tiger market, Asian countries. You look at Asia, North Korea, and compare its development to that of the Philippines, which is a longstanding colony of the United States. I mean, numbers speak for themselves.
Myanmar.
I just want to say that, in 2020, there was this big depression, which affected the United States, right? The stock market crashed. I think it was on March 20th, which was known as Black Thursday. And then the stock market did not go back up. I think it was the day of the lockdowns. When was that? March 16th, right? Black Monday. But it was worldwide, even China. By the way, the only country in the world that had a positive GDP in 2020, 2021, 2022 was North Korea. It was the only country in the world that had a positive GDP between 2020 and 2022. And okay, it was, about 1%, but still it was phenomenal in comparison to all these other countries, including China, that had negative GDPs. And it's steady to this day without stock market manipulations, right? Which, that's what they do in the West, right? To make it seem like the economy is better than what it is. But yeah.
Yeah, actually, I'm looking at some information that showed China's GDP growth in 2021 was 8.4%.
Yeah, it was definitely positive growth.
Yeah, like, I mean, the Chinese have had consistent growth for most of my lifetime, for decades. They even when people say they'll fall, they won't.
But in 2020 to 2022 in China, you had a situation where I shouldn't say no one. There was a big collapse in the foreign market. So half of the Chinese GDP was based on American and European markets. And so for a little while, because people were getting the incentives in the US, there was still some buying, but not as much as before. And once 2021 came, America was not importing nearly as much. I can't remember the exact figures, but it was a huge decline, like nearly 50%. And the same thing was true in Europe. So their two largest markets really hurt Chinese GDP. I mean, they did begin in 2022 to have a
Interesting.
turnaround.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they had a turnaround in 2022, but by the end of 2022.
Yeah, and another thing that's worth noting, people mention stock market manipulation, but another thing that a lot of people don't point out is that a lot of the United States' alleged GDP growth is in debt. People in the China wave, for example, it points out that if you use purchasing power parity, which is a measurement. My understanding is that's a measurement of the average consumer's ability to buy goods on the market, right? And that's a much better measurement of how the economy is actually doing. China has surpassed the United States, and surpassed the United States as early as like 2015.
Yeah, they're and that's the more meaningful metric too.
So
also,
Jessica, are you muted?
You muted, Jessica.
sorry. Oh, sorry. I was going to say one of the big GDPs in the United States, which no one talks about, is the fact is medical care. I mean, that is not something positive. People owing thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars to medical care. So, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, that's the destructive accumulation phenomenon, where it's like it's economic profit in the United States is related to things that overall make society poorer, and that the productivity of society, the physical economy is diminished, and they turn that into a mechanism for enriching themselves.
Prisons, weapons, like military contracts.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and then every state has to some degree or other a weapons industry and weapons industry pipeline, to make sure that senators will not want to vote against war. I remember when Elizabeth Warren ran for president, right? That was the excuse for why they said that she couldn't oppose, intervention in the Middle East. Oh, but there's so many jobs in Massachusetts associated with weapons, and that's true actually. Raytheon and Boeing are huge hirers of. If you go to a school that is accredited for engineering, who are they going to be the main people at the jobs fair who are hiring people? It's going to be Raytheon and it's going to be Boeing, and that's very unfortunate. It's very unfortunate. And it's.
I just want to bring up it. Medical care is 18% of the U.S. GDP. Think about that. They poison our food, right, on purpose, poison our water, poison our air, and that's considered a great thing because 18% of the GDP is spent on medical care. And by the way, the average person in the United States spends $15,474 if you were to average it out. How insane is this? Okay. And by the way, the average American owes $50,000 in debt, not including medical debt.
Yeah. And I don't.
I mean, can you imagine North Korea basing their GDP on this, or Cuba or any other country, or China? I mean, it's obscene.
Yeah. Sick society in more ways than one. And speaking of sick societies, to your point, Noah, not just in Massachusetts, but of course in every state, the companies that we collectively call the military industrial complex have made sure that there is weapons manufacturing for the military in every state, so that every senator has to have their reelection dependent on these jobs that are toward the destructive accumulation. And so it's by design. They want people to be dependent on this.
Yeah, they very much do. And the healthcare industry is so predative. And nobody knows a single person who, does not have a negative story associated with with the American healthcare industry. Everybody knows somebody who has had issues. I mean, and everybody has had issues. I remember when I broke my hands at the gym, right? And I got prescribed antibiotics. And it's very, very basic. And I went to the pharmacy, and at the time oh, well, we don't take federal employee health insurance. It's like, well, what do you mean? It's like, oh, no. It's like, well, there's a pharmacy like 2 miles down the road. You can go there. It's like, well, I can't drive. My hands are broken. Like, what do you want me to do? It was snowing out. I just walk there. Okay. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Like, what other population would put up with that? I mean, it really speaks to resilience.
Look, if you get healthcare in the United States, it's just incidental. It really is. It's just incidental. It's not.
Yeah. Uh,
Yeah, some of the payments, even for like people who on paper have good dental. I worked at a dental thing earlier this uh dental clinic earlier this year, and like some of the rates they were charging were pretty insane. It's like it's in and like on paper, most of these people had dental insurance. Like on paper, it was supposed to be covered, but
Yeah, and
I'm
it's
letting you
absolutely
continue.
outrageous that in a lot of ways our country does not always consider dental a necessity, like they don't consider it part of medical. That's crazy.
Oh, of course, of course.
And hearing aids.
Yep, they
Dental
make a
insurance is
society
so bad.
that's so loud that it damages people's hearing, and then they don't take care of people's hearing.
Oh, and eyeglasses. They're not, even if
Don't remind me. I need to get new ones soon.
oh my
Very
God.
soon.
My dentist actually told me not to get dental insurance because he thought would be cheaper for me to just pay for my dental care out of pocket, and I think he's right so far.
oh, that's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
One thing I've heard about the DPRK from people who've gone when I spoke to Jyoti about when she went to the DPRK, she said that the two things that you notice is how quiet it is and that like almost nobody wears glasses.
No.
You know,
Mm.
that was something that was really interesting because like there's not the because even China, right, has like, because of the market sector and stuff like that, the huge market sector, and I mean, it is gorgeous. Like if you look at Shanghai or Beijing, just like
Mm.
the level of development and this beautiful cityscapes with the neon
Mm.
lights and the advertisements, like it does look gorgeous, but like, from what I hear, it's just so peaceful and so quiet, right? And so like serene.
Yeah. I mean, I've also heard there have been people talking about how looking at screens can damage your eyes. Like that's not just something your parents say. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't. I mean,
Mm.
there, and I'm just gonna say maybe the reason there aren't so many people with glasses in the DPRK is because, it's not easy to make them under the sanctions. So that's a possibility, I think.
Or also they're not on computers. They're actually having like a real life. Like I think they
Yeah,
have
yeah. Of
dancing every week in Pyongyang. So
course,
I
yeah,
mean
of
they're
course.
not obsessed on the internet. Although I do have kind of a good story. I mean, I know I had a friend and he was in China. He got food poisoning and he says he was very sick in the hospital. And after 3 days, he realized he wasn't getting any better. And so he called a cab. And this is a little bit, not good on the side of China. They demanded that he pay them like whatever money because he owed them for the hospital visit. And he's like, look, here's the money. I got to get the hell out of here. And they were right next to the North Korean border. And he says he drove to the cab and he told them, go to the North Korean border. And he says, well, why? He says, I'm going to die in the hospital. I'm so sick. Just take me there. He gets to the border and the official there looks at him and says, oh my God, you so sick. And he's like, do you want my papers? No, no, no. We'll get them in when you get to the hospital. You need to go to the hospital right now. And they took him out of the cab, drove him to the local hospital. And he said he doesn't know what they gave him because at the hospital, no one spoke any English at the time. But he said within 2-3 hours, he was feeling great. And then they gave him this beautiful dish of food, which he would not eat because he didn't know what it was. It was like all these weird things. And so then they thought he was still sick. Because things like sea urchins, like sea urchins are a big deal in North Korea, but as an Australian, he's like, oh my God, sea urchins. Oh my God, what is that?
It's
Um,
actually really good.
yeah, well, but he's Australian, sea urchins was not a thing for him. And but he said that eventually they asked him, like, you must be hungry, and he's like, I want noodles. He's like, Chinese noodles. They're like, why you want Chinese noodle? Sea urchin, sea urchin. Uh, but um, but he said it was amazing. He says, you know what? If I hadn't been so sick, I wouldn't have gone to North Korea. He says the healthcare was absolutely free. They treated him with so much respect and so much dignity. He wanted Chinese noodles. They gave him Chinese noodles, but like they did try to give him like Korean specialties that he just was not happy with. But He had a wonderful tour of North Korea, and so he had a wonderful time. And he wanted to get on the call tonight, but he just can't seem to get on these calls.
I love that. North Korea saved him, and then again he almost died of being a spoiled brat.
Whenever my social media feed recently, you'll get people who are encouraging people to do tourism in the DPRK. It's like, oh, I've been to the DPRK. Like, here was my experience. And it's just like normal tourism stuff. And every time the comments are like, why would you go to the DPRK? What is there to see in the DPRK? Well, the government's just tricking you. This is just a bunch of propaganda. And it's like, you are the propaganda. First of all, like, you are doing the propaganda. It's like, our propaganda in America is so sophisticated. These people don't know that they're being propagandized.
Yeah.
And like, they see the reality and they're like, that's just a bunch of propaganda. That's number one. And second of all, I don't really understand what this whole thing is. Why would you ever go to an anti-imperialist country? I got the same thing when I went to Russia. Oh, why would you ever go to Russia? What is there to see in Russia? That's like, these are the same people who go to like colonies of the United States in the Bahamas, or
worse, they're British
in the ocean, like these island countries that we've kept in poverty, right? And they go to a nice resort.
Yeah, they go to literal bunga lands with like broken down shacks, and then they're like, why would you want to see stuff in Russia and Korea?
Yeah, and the DPRK, they have some of the world's most beautiful national parks too. So I think that would be particularly a good tourist destination.
Oh, about the Caribbean islands, worse. They're not like I mean, they are what you said they are, but they're British Commonwealth members. They're British, so it's worse than them just being like freaking puppet money laundering things and whatnot. They are, but they're in the Commonwealth.
Yeah, right. I mean, things could be worse. We could be in Canada, right? I mean, Canada, I've never seen more Ukraine flags, and also the free speech situation is worse there than here. Britain's free speech situation is really bad right now too, apparently.
Yeah, imagine it being illegal to question the Holodomor. The Holodomor, Grover Furs not existing if we lived in the British territory of Canada. So, but anyway, back to Korea. I think we can go to our next quote. Then Sukarno said sincerely that he wanted the flower to be named after Kim Il-sung. The director of the botanical garden, too, expressed his wish to call it Kim Il-sungya. Kim Il-sung suggestion, saying that he had done nothing so special that there were need to name a flower after him. Sukarno replied, "No, you have rendered enormous services to all of mankind, so you deserve a high honor." He refused to withdraw his request. Back in Jakarta, he repeatedly brought the matter to us. On receiving a report about it, President Kim Il-sung said that if President Sukarno and the Indonesian people wished so sincerely, he would accept the suggestion as a token of their esteem for our people and of friendship. That's sweet. I mean, he didn't even want the flower to be named after him. He was like, I didn't have anything to do with making this flower, and I guess President Sukarno was just so astonished by what he saw, by the economic growth in the DPRK and stuff like that he just insisted. I mean, it could be that this story is not true, but I think it is a very nice story. So
it reminds me of Stalin a little bit in the sense that, like, not all of the cult of personality stuff was his idea. And I know.
Right, and that. Right, and you hear stories about like Stalin. There was a big picture of him, and he was with his grandchild, right? And it was like, "Granddad, are you Stalin?" He said, "No, I'm your grandfather. That's Stalin," right? And that genuinely, these people gave expression. These great leaders, these great socialists give expression to the feelings of their people. That they provide leadership and a paternal figure for their people, somebody to look up to, right? They're sort of the CEO of the country in the old, sort of Stalinist model of development and stuff like that. and that sometimes they're often uncomfortable with, with the praise. And I know humility is also a big part of Korean culture. So that's sort of a virtue signal on Kim Il-sung's part, to be honest. It's like, but that also, it's like, oh, go ahead, Caleb.
Oh, I just wanted to say Kim Jong-Il, when he died, he was on a train from one part of North Korea to another, and he was going to inspect factories because that's what he did. Like, and if you look at what like Stalin did in the USSR with the Stakhanovist program, what Fidel Castro did, and what the leaders of these countries did, is it's like, if you worked really, really hard, you got a reward. And so basically they just went from workplace to workplace, giving out medals and awards for the people who worked the hardest. And so when Kim Jong-il died, even as an old man, like in his 80s, right, he was on a train going from one part of North Korea to another because he was going to have to go someplace and give people medals for working really, really hard. And that if you go to Cuba, like every Cuban can tell you about the day Fidel Castro came to their workplace. Every North Korean can tell you about their experience when at their factory or their hospital or their farm, when they got visited by Kim Il-sung, right? And that their job is like they kind of play this role as like the national celebrity of the country, who is constantly encouraging everybody and constantly rewarding people for working really, really hard, who everyone wants to be like, everyone wants to please. Kind of, it's very interesting. And this is also Stalin. I mean, Lenin wasn't around for this. I mean, this kind of model, the really existing socialism model is, it's very much something that was engineered by Stalin that was very, very effective in countries that were underdeveloped, getting the power plants built, getting the roads paved, wiping out illiteracy, building modern universities.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And when you look
and
at
also,
the people,
I think, go ahead, Gavin. Sorry.
And when you look at the people we're taught to idolize in the West, especially in America, it's often people there whose contributions to society are questionable compared to a genuine political leader who has helped people.
Yeah, they tell you to look up to Justin Bieber when kids, Magellan was a lot cooler than Justin Bieber. He circumnavigated the globe. But that also, I think, cult of personality was, it's to some extent or other, it's sort of a symptom of a healthy, country. It's sort of a, you can say, oh, well, those people are brainwashed, but like, can you imagine if we lived in a country where like the president was somebody that you could look up to and admire? Where they were
this
like
reminds
genuinely.
Me of, this. You finish. I'll make mine next, Noah.
Yeah, they were genuinely just like a humble, good-natured person who wanted the best for the country, and they lived, a relatively humble life. I believe when Stalin died, I mean, he didn't really have that many possessions. He lived in a small apartment until his death. I mean, and, Kim Jong-il died on a train. You know what I mean? And I think we did similar things with, I think of Abraham Lincoln, how everybody wanted to be like Lincoln, to the point where like every president afterwards claimed that they grew up in a log cabin because Lincoln had grown up in a log cabin.
I think that's
and
also
that,
why I think that's also why we started embalming, because they took Lincoln's body on like yeah.
It is. And the tradition of like sort of mummifying a leader, like was done with Lenin and like was done with Mao Zedong. We invented that, it was after, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, they preserved his body and they took him on a tour across the country to show the hero's sacrifice and to show how Lincoln had given his entire life to keep the Union together and to sort of, rally the people to keep the Union intact and to move forward with Reconstruction. I mean, so in some ways, we can't even say that this is like a foreign alien thing, and that when America was at its best, we had what you could call a cult of personality. I think of Roosevelt too, how they wouldn't even show Roosevelt's face in movies. He was sort of this like, it was offensive to even portray Roosevelt and his greatness, and everybody sort of saw him as a paternal figure at the end of like the Annie movies, right? He adopts Annie the orphan, right? Because she's sort of the symbol of a kid who's lost their way. That's sort of us, and that we've been adopted by great Roosevelt, and everything's going to be okay because of him. But anyway, unanimous. You had.
I was going to say, this reminds me of an interaction Macron had with a teenager. Like Macron was like, "Call me sir, call me Mr. President." And it was seen, and it's like, and it's interesting because I think most Chinese teenagers, if they we're meeting with Xi. Russian teenagers, if they were meeting with Putin, Iranian teenagers, if the supreme leader comes to the school, it's like, oh, Mr. President, Mr. Supreme Leader, sir, ma'am. Very, there's respect. That they have a leader they can respect. I mean, what's honorable about Keir Starmer? What's honorable about Donald Trump? What's honorable about Macron?
I just wanted to say that, Abraham Lincoln is an interesting study, and you could argue that, it was the Second American Revolution. There was a big, Marxist current of supporting Lincoln, like, August Willock and the Ohio 9th Infantry Regiment. Also, the guy, Dale Carnegie, who was like one of the big self-help guys, he wrote a biography of Abraham Lincoln, kind of pointing to Lincoln as the ideal politician. And he's the guy who wrote How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I wrote this article for China.org called China Wins Friends and Influences People that created quite a stir. It was back in 2017, where I argued that China's foreign policy was similar to what Dale Carnegie advocated and all of that. So I just thought I might want to share that. But Wallace Wattles, who I also like, he talks about Abraham Lincoln quite a bit in his writing as well. So, Lincoln's personality and like, his traits are, I think, very interesting.
Yes, he's a fascinating figure. Yeah, I cannot tell a lie. We've always sort of done that thing with our leaders when America was healthy. At least I think Kennedy was the last president that we sort of did that with. And then afterwards we had Nixon, the crook, and we had Ford was a buffoon, and Carter, the incompetent old man, and Reagan, the dementia patient, and it's been all downhill since there with our opinion of our leaders. But anyway, next quote. President Sukarno promised that he would ensure the technique of cultivating the flower would be completed and that it would be sent to our country in 1 or 2 years. But the flower failed to come to our country for several years, owing to a coup d'etat in Indonesia. Later, Sukarno left politics, and the director of the Bogart Botanical Garden and the florist who had bred the flower disappeared without a trace. We can go on to the next quote after that because it's related. Our officials who went to Indonesia to trace the flower found that after the rapid change of situation in that country, the director of the Bogart Botanical Garden had worked as a hotel gardener on an outlying island and done his best to trace his whereabouts of the botanist who had bred Kim Il-sungya, but failed to find him. On the verge of death, he made his son promise to find the man by all means and to convey Kim Il-sungya to President Kim Il-sung. Next quote. Kim Il-sungya is a national treasure, and it is a great pride and honor for the Korean people to have an immortal flower named after President Kim Il-sung. We must cultivate this flower to ensure that it's handed down through generations and is cultivated in every part of the country. I think that that's just so interesting that, actually, like, I had sort of pictured it as like the flower was given to Kim Il-sung, right? And then he went back and then the coup happened years later. And actually the coup happened before the flower made it back to North Korea, right? And the botanist died, and his son, like his dying wish to his son was that you give the flower to Kim Il-sung. And that Kim Il-sung, did every effort. I guess it was quite difficult to get the flower to grow and in North Korea. And we went through quite an effort. It took several years of them trying to be able to successfully cultivate it. And the essay mentions how today it grows in every single city in North Korea, from Pyongyang all the way around. And that it's really the symbol of North Korea and its well-being and Kim Il-sung's greatness as a leader, and that they want to do everything in their power to promote Kim Il-sungya as a flower. Which I think is quite a beautiful story. They should make a movie about this, but I don't think they ever would. Maybe the DPRK would, but certainly not Hollywood. So I think we have one last quote, which we have been living up to. Oh no, sorry. Go back. Yeah. The annual Kim Il Sung Festival is a political festival which demonstrates to the whole world the faith and will of the Korean nation to honor President Kim Il Sung forever and exalts his immortal exploits down through all generations. We must organize the festival in a more magnificent and significant way, thus celebrating the Day of the Sun, the greatest national holiday, in a meaningful way. I think that's really interesting. I mean, they have like a national holiday dedicated to this flower and to remembering Kim Il Sung, and that really like the day that is to remember Kim Il Sung is not about Kim Il Sung. It's about this story of friendship between Korea and the people of Indonesia. I think that really speaks to the Korean people's ability, you know, their solidarity with the people of the world, their commitment to anti-imperialism, and I also think it's just you know, it says a lot about you know, the commitment of you know, proletarian movements for beauty and stuff like that. That really, you know, we have this image of you know, of the DPRK as like this dull, you know, wasteland. You know, they show the picture of, you know, there's dry concrete, and I think the BBC has this policy where whenever they show China or whenever they show the DPRK, they put a special filter on it so that it will look very drab and lifeless, right? And that's really the stereotype of an anti-imperialist country, sort of dry concrete and lifeless buildings, right? And everything's colorless. And that the symbol of Kim Il Sung for the people of Korea, and the symbol of their revolution and its success, and the symbol of their friendship with the people of the world and their commitment, you know, their ability to make commitments to other people, is this like beautiful, vibrant pink flower. I just think that that's so interesting, and I can't really think of another country, you know, that has that relationship to maybe like the Netherlands with like tulips or something, but I don't know. Do folks have any comments on that?
Isn't there another flower that was cultivated? This one is called Kim Jong-Il, but it's not Indonesian. It was cultivated by a Japanese botanist in the 80s. There's another
I believe
flower.
so, yes.
You can hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you here.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's good to see you, Noah, and everybody here in the live stream. I may be mistaken, but it may be so. If you look at the Iranian flag and you look at how the it looks like a tulip, and the way it's structured, the way that at the very center of the flag, and it's supposed to be the Arabic for like God is the greatest. So it's like in short, and it's basically it's like shaped like a tulip. It's not, you know, it's not so it's not so deeply creative and fancy as like the Kim Il Sung which the story, and I remember you explained it well, Noah, and Caleb also talked about it, and it talks about like Sukarno, who was meeting with Kim Il Sung in Indonesia, and then they had a really large flower, and then they were able to basically like commemorate North Korea, you know, and North Korea was able to use that as a symbol. So I think in the Iranian flag, it looks a bit like a flower, like a tulip, but it's not. It wasn't really. It's more like it's kind of like the way it looks. You know, I just wanted to bring that up. Yeah.
Yeah, I googled it. I guess it's a Damascus rose, I believe it's called. But yeah, I didn't know that. I hadn't even thought to look into that. But it is interesting because, you know, the propaganda. Oh, Penny.
Hi.
Like full screen Penny, I guess.
I don't know how that happened, but I did want to mention that I noticed you were talking about the filters when the BBC does China or contemporary countries. I noticed that when I was doing some research, trying to get some images for my speech about trains, and the videos from China were just so dark, and you didn't see anything but just plain infrastructure. But the videos from the CGTN were on the train, and they had this beautiful picture of an elderly lady with her white fur hat, and that was talking about the silver trains. So it's totally true. I totally noticed that, what you were saying.
Yeah, I mean, and that was really like, since they like since the Cold War strategists like reoriented their strategy in like the 60s, right? It stopped being the fight against godless communism, but it became like sort of liberal, airy-fairy, free love people against authoritarianism, right? And the symbol of the Soviet Union is a mechanical cold tank, right? And they show pictures of just like colorless clothes, right? And concrete buildings, and still to this day, it's like, oh, well, here's like a place where people are living in Cuba, and it's like a drab concrete building. It's like, well, yeah, maybe, but they also abolished homelessness. I mean, you can
Yeah.
talk about how they abolished homelessness, and not that they're, the poor people in Cuba, their houses aren't really nice. Well, poor people in America don't have houses.
They do this with like random Eastern Bloc countries all the time. Yeah. But what they don't realize is a lot of these homes were super cheap. They were great. They were by parks, they were by public transit. I mean, they're not the worst place to live. I mean,
that's one of the dumbest things about this kind of new anti-communism we're getting from all the Trumpers. Now that DSA won, now they have to all just discover that, communism is the greatest threat to everything. And like one of the things that, you can point out to just kind of debunk them is they say, oh, in communism, you can't own anything. We'll point out to them that in all the communist countries, the rate of home ownership is higher than in America. Like more Chinese people own their own home than Americans do by percentage. More Cubans own their own home. More North Koreans own their own home. Like home ownership, which used to be the symbol of the American dream, you own your own home, is pretty much gone for the American working class, but it's alive in communist countries.
Yeah. One in 4 Americans between the age of 18 and 30 still lives at home, I believe, and it may even be higher now. Or no, I believe the statistic was like 53% or something. It's like ridiculously high. It lives at home, and the stated reason for living at home was that they, quote, couldn't afford not to. And yet I've read articles about how in China, if you are 30 and don't own a home, it's considered to be like a great shame. Like you've kind of like failed, it's like, oh, my life is such a disgrace. Like I haven't been able to buy my own house at 30, which used to kind of how it was in the United States. I've also noticed that like, folks, if you talk to folks from Russia, right, they really, the idea of like living with roommates is like gross to them, right? Because they're used to like having affordable housing, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I heard that they are actually trying to build more housing in Russia and in North Korea. Like North Korea, they're always building housing, but now they're trying to make it so much better. Better telecommunications infrastructure. Better heating systems. They can finally get.
Yeah, there's been a luxury housing boom in the DPRK since 2018. That was their latest economic boom. I mean, they had,
and it's not just in
luxury
Pyongyang. It's not just in Pyongyang. It's also in rural regions.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
I
true.
also
I mean,
noticed there's recent articles.
The rate of development is quite even, and I will say.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Well, I noticed that there were recent articles. There were recent articles that I saw that confirmed that the so-called ghost cities in China now have lots of people living in them. So they were never ghost cities. They just built houses.
Yes, that was a common attack.
I'd rather have ghost cities than Skid Row. I'd rather have a ghost city than like a whole patch of empty lots full of homeless people.
Well, when I was in high school, I remember that was the ghost city attack, right? It was that, oh, well, China allegedly has all of this economic growth, but what it actually is they're scamming the GDP numbers by building all of this fake housing. And then what it turned out was that they were actually, what they would do is they would move all of the people out of an area, and then they would build government housing that was quite cheap, and they would like build up a modern city, and then they would move the people into the modern city. That's all it was. It was just planning an economy. So that was really embarrassing. That's a common thing. It's like they'll predict, well, China's economy is a house of cards because of X, Y, and Z, and then it will turn out, oh, it was just that they were planning something.
Same with North Korea. When I was in college, I remember my freshman year of college, which was 2007. We like the first article we had to, do. It was the English class and that we took, and we had to read an article from Atlantic Monthly and have a discussion about it every week and discuss the writing, but also the article. And the first article we read was When North Korea Falls. And it was predicting that North Korea was going to fall within a year or two. And that was way back in 2007, the first year I was in college. So whoopsie daisy, and China's always about to fall. North Korea is always about to fall. These countries, they're just, they're on the brink of falling. They just can't last, it's pretty silly.
I mean, in Iran, I think they're still strong.
Because everybody knows that communism has never worked anywhere it's ever tried. So,
yeah, there you go.
Yeah, everybody knows. So, I mean, it just has to be. They must be.
They
must be about to collapse.
And he is inept.
Yeah, I remember we had a. Right. Kim Jong-Un is simultaneously an all-powerful being who mind controls his entire population into doing whatever he wants, but also he's a terrible leader that nobody can listen to, and the DPRK is on the brink of collapse. It's both things at once,
Yeah, like they'll say Putin is both a bloodthirsty maniac, but he's also a stupid guy. Like they'll say the enemy is both strong and he is weak. How he is both, I do not know.
Right. I mean, the latest was there was a Wall Street Journal article that was implying that Putin was harvesting like organs to try and live forever. And then that was like the headline of the article would lead you to believe he was caught on a hot mic talking to Xi Jinping about how you can harvest organs and live forever. And if you read the article, it's just that, they've been researching longevity techniques and they're looking into like ways to synthetically help people who have like organ failure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. 3D printed organs. These are nothing new.
Don't tell my family. The next time I go to Russia, they'll be afraid that Putin's going to steal my heart and liver. They're luring me there so they can get my organs. I mean, this is so stupid. I mean, they just come up with so many things. I mean, it's just infuriating.
They'll basically claim that the Chinese are harvesting organs because they'll say, oh, they pull it off people they execute. Well, no, what happens is in China, organ donations are just a given. It's harder to opt out. In my opinion, I like that system. I think that system's better because a lot of the times the lines for people to get organs in the States are quite long. I mean, you can disagree. That's just how things are.
I also think it's a matter of religious.
There's two things. First of all, you have to be alive to be an organ donor. You can't harvest organs from a dead person. But you know what? If you're afraid of organ donation, then don't go to a hospital, because all hospitals are involved in murdering patients. There's so much money to be made in stealing organs. And I can tell you that because I nearly experienced that. It's a miracle that I'm alive. By the way, George, who you know, Caleb, if it wasn't for him coming to the hospital, I would have been dead. They were going to cut me up. I actually heard them talking about how they're going to make a lot of money from cutting up my organs.
Well, doesn't Israel do that when they I know you said you can't do it with dead people, but the Electronic Intifada and Gray Zone have often said that Israel harvests organs from the Palestinians.
I'm sure they do.
Skin. Especially skin, because they're not native to the area, so they get skin cancer, so they graft the skin.
That makes sense. I could see them doing that. But I've also heard there are operations throughout the former Eastern Bloc of basically just kidnapping babies from the hospital, and then they'll end up on adoption websites and whatnot. Like,
we're at time. I think we should play the video of Noah it's because we have this pamphlet called "Why Is It Impossible to Get This Flower in America?" And the debut distribution was at Riverside Church in New York City. And Noah.
The last quote actually ties into this, Caleb.
What's that?
The last quote ties into this. Yeah, there's a quote for this. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I believe that our officials will cultivate Kim Il-sung with success and propagate it widely and conduct education properly by means of this flower. So I think that, us publishing this pamphlet is very much living up to Kim Jong-il's words that we are propagating widely and using this flower to conduct education among the American masses. So I think we can show that video of us at Riverside Church doing some great work. We're here outside of the historic Riverside Church in Harlem, New York City. Historic church involved with the civil rights movement and many other struggles. Big center for ban the bomb protests. It's where Martin Luther King famously gave his speech condemning the Vietnam War and talking about how we needed some sort of democratic socialism.
Went on a Sunday to pass out these, and the people were friendly. This last part, hope that one day we could all merge together.
Talks about the Kim Il-sung. It was a symbol of friendship between Indonesia and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea at the time when Sukarno, who was part of the non-aligned movement. When people think about North Korea, they think about military parades. They think of people starving in the streets. They think of very dire looking cities. This is something that's full of life and hope and optimism. It's a flower that only grows in a socialist country, and it's hard to get because of the sanctions that have been imposed on North Korea and that are very harsh and unfair.
They were like saying, is there a garden or is there a flower shop that they sell this? And I'm like, well, you have to find out. And I told them about that Kim Il-sung flower, and the back part I kept reading.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great night.